Hey, this is George Anderson from intelligentrunning.com, and today I want to clear up a few things about a training method that many runners use but perhaps don't fully understand. I'm talking about heart rate training, and it's a shame that it's so commonly misunderstood because it does have the potential and the power to make your training way more targeted and specific, which, as we all know, leads to better results, and we all want a bit of that, don't we? So let's just begin by taking a quick look at why would we even want to use HRT in the first place. That's not hormone replacement therapy, by the way. It's just there's lots of abbreviations going to be coming your way in the next 10, 15 minutes or so. So HRT now stands for heart rate training. So let's just get that one cleared up right away. In a word, heart rate training, or HRT, is about intensity. It's a way of allowing us to monitor our intensity. And as you know, I'm fanatical about making sure that the runs we carry out are carried out at the correct intensity. After all, if you're going to put all the effort going for a run, you may as well get the best results possible out of your time invested, right? So it makes sense to make sure that we're running at the right intensity. So it's really it's a method of monitoring how hard that our bodies are working. Intensity directly correlates to heart rate. And so if we use this information, which is available in real time via technology that really doesn't have to cost the earth, then we can run at the speed that's going to bring about the desired response. But the big problem with HRT is that it's so often used incorrectly. I don't mean that we train in the wrong zones all the time, but that the zones we're aiming for are way out of whack. So if you work out what your heart rate training zones are, you may well be aiming for the right area. But if that's completely miscalculated, then you're going to be in trouble here. It usually comes down to one thing, and that is the calculation or the estimation of your maximum heart rate. And because all training zone calculations are a function of this number, for example, 65% or 85% of max heart rate, just as an example there, you get this wrong by more than just a few beats per minute and your entire training program, it could be screwed. I mean, if you're trying to run at 85% of your max heart rate to get a lactic training response, for example, and you've calculated this to be 160 beats per minute, but actually it's more like 170 beats per minute, then this is a physiological maximum. It means you cannot go higher than this. You will not ever be able to get your heart to beat faster than 170 beats per minute in this case. And if you're estimating it to be 160, then you're consistently undertraining by 10 beats per minute. Now, you're just not going to get any quicker by training like this. You're just undertraining the whole time. Or it could go the other way as well, by the way. You could be overtraining and wondering why you're finding things so damn difficult all the time. But either way, it's not good news. So how do you get to the figure for your max heart rate? Well, the usual way to do it, and the reason why so many people get it wrong, is because we use the formula 220 minus your age. Nice simple formula, just plug it in there, you can do it in your head. Just take your age off 220, that's your max heart rate, and you work out your percentages as a proportion of that. The trouble is, unless you're within the 5% of the population for whom this equation actually works, you may well be out by plus or minus 20 beats per minute. So it's not a particularly good estimate. But it's the one that we use. I think it's really the one we use because of its simplicity, and it's just easy to go with something that we can just work out, and it's a good ballpark figure. But if you're looking at intelligent training and being accurate with your training zones, then you're going to run into trouble unless you're, like I said, in that 5% of the population for whom this equation does actually work. So although the max heart rate does indeed drop off with age, it is not a linear relationship. And what that means is it's not a simple case of subtracting 1 from your maximum every time you have a birthday. Over the years, there have also been a load of other studies carried out into max heart rate, and the relationship has been proved to be nonlinear. Okay, it's a little more complicated to work out, but at least it gives us a slightly better approximation as to how we can calculate our max heart rate. Let's go through a couple of these now, just briefly. We've got these guys back in the early 80s. They came up with the equation. All these have been done with studies of probably hundreds of different runners, and this is specific to running, by the way. You wouldn't use this for calculating your swimming max heart rate, or your cycling, or your rowing max heart rate. This is just for running, so don't get mixed up with thinking this is just your max heart rate for everything, because all of these different disciplines will have different maximums, okay, for some reason. So we've got 206.3 minus 0.711 times your age. So a pretty complex formula. You've got to dig out the calculator to work that one out. But so you can see that it's because it's a percentage of your age that you're subtracting, it's not necessarily going to be a linear response there. So that's the first one. And they're all kind of along the same sort of lines, just with different figures here. Early 90s, Miller et al. 217 minus 0.85 times your age gives you a slightly different figure. These guys in the USA a few years ago, they came up with this again, a similar formula. And then there's these ones. This is from Liverpool, John Moores University here in the UK. They came up with different. They separated male and female into two groups and said, well, males will have a different max heart rate to females, and this is what we found with our studies. So there's different formulae there as well. So the bottom line is you can kind of work out using any of these formulae. You can work out a slightly more accurate estimation for your max heart rate, and it is still an estimation, but at least it's going with a non-linear equation, which we know is more accurate than just going with a 220 minus your age. But they can't all be correct, actually. There's no way that all of these can be correct. They've obviously all done similar studies to work out what max heart rate is with different people of different ages, and take them to the max and actually studied them and what the response is, and they've come up with these equations. But they can't all be right. And in fact, if I plug my age, 32 years old, into the equations, or into all these equations, and I get a spread of between 184 and 190 beats per minute. Like even this 6 beat swing from the outer levels, outer ranges here, could still cause problems if I'm trying to hold a precise 85% for a training session, for example. Though having said that, it's probably better than just going off 220 minus your age, which, like I said, is potentially very inaccurate for most of the population. So what I'd suggest doing is just plugging your age into all of these calculations. Just go back and have a look at them, stick your age in, and kind of see what pops out the other end. See what your spread looks like, and then make a judgment call about what you think is realistic. You'll know from some of your runs in the past, if you have been monitoring heart rate, what you feel you've ever gone up to, what's the highest you've ever gone up to, and what you think is probably the highest max heart rate, and then where is that in that zone there? Is it towards the top end or the low end? So you kind of got to make a judgment call at some point if you're using estimations here. But it does get more complicated than this, because actually, after all that, max heart rate isn't even the end. That's not really what we're interested in. What we really want to calculate is our working heart rate range, or our heart rate reserve. And this takes into account our resting heart rate as well. Now, given that we can't go higher than our max heart rate and we can't go lower than our resting heart rate, what we have left in the end is this range of heart rates that are available for us to work in. So your HRR, your heart rate range, is your max heart rate minus your resting heart rate. Now, if we want to be more accurate, then our percentages, 65, 70, 85%, whatever, should be calculated using this number rather than just using max heart rate. But you need to get your resting heart rate in order to work this one out, and it's not just sat down, take your pulse now for 60 seconds. You need to do this first thing in the morning. I like to do mine kind of first thing before I even sit up in bed, and do it over 3 or 4 mornings in a row and get an average, so you get a good idea as to what your real resting heart rate is. Incidentally, if you've ever done a really tough training session, then chances are your resting heart rate the next morning will be slightly elevated. And many elite athletes use this as an indicator to let them know if this is actually, they need to back off their training a little bit because they're overdoing things. So just do these in a week, maybe 3 or 4 mornings in a week where you're not doing huge volumes or huge intensities of training, and hopefully you should get a good idea as to what your resting heart rate is. This is also going to change as well. The fitter you get, the lower your resting heart rate will go. You can't really do much about your max heart rate other than get a year older each year, but you can change your resting heart rate, and the fitter you are, the stronger your heart is, the stronger the pump is, and the easier it is for it to pump more blood around the body per beat. I remember once, a couple of years ago now, I was taking my resting heart rate, and I actually got it down to, I was using a heart rate monitor to do it, and I got it down to about 37 beats per minute, which is pretty low. But then I got so excited that it was so low, it shot right up into the 60s, and it ruined everything. So Best just to do it. Don't get too excited if it does go nice and low. Okay, so that's anyway. That's a pretty sad story there. Let's move on. So take an example here. If we're looking at 85% of your max heart rate, then actually what we want is 85% or 0.85, which is 85%, multiplied by the difference between your maximum and resting heart rate, and then add back on at the end when you've done all that your resting heart rate again. And this will give you a very slightly different figure to if you just took max heart rate and worked that out, as in 85% of just your estimated max heart rate. You still with me? Good. So, I mean, this is important because many watches and other devices won't do this for you. And you can usually tell if they're going to take resting heart rate into account because they'll ask you to input it when you're setting it up. It's far better to calculate, in my opinion, it's far better to calculate your ranges yourself. And you can switch off that annoying beep on your watch. It tells you when you're in the correct zone or not, especially if it's actually meaningless. So it's time to take some responsibility for your training and not rely 100% on technology to tell you how hard to work. You only have to work the stuff out once. Write it down or commit it to memory, then just go out and conquer all. It's as simple as that, really. Once you get a greater understanding of what's happening with your body and with your training and the response you have to the training, the more effective you're going to be and the more intelligent a runner you're going to be as well. Now, I'm going to be doing a follow-up post probably next week about alternative methods of measuring intensity, as well as a more accurate way of working out your maximum heart rate that doesn't involve any kind of complicated equation. So keep your ears and eyes posted for that one. But in the meantime, thanks a million for watching today. I'm George Anderson, and I'll be back soon with more intelligent running strategies.